Imagine a father, a righteous man who survived the greatest judgment in human history, looking at his own son and with words filled with mysterious weight, placing a curse on him that would echo for generations. What could possibly justify something so terrible? What had Ham done that was so serious to provoke this reaction from Noah? Was it just a common mistake or a sin that should terrify us to this day? This is one of the most enigmatic and dark moments in the Bible, an episode that has raised questions for centuries and that can reveal shocking truths about human nature and the consequences of sin. In this video, we will delve deep into this story, explore the details that often go unnoticed, and understand why this curse was not just a punishment, but a divine warning that spans the centuries. And believe me, once you discover the true meaning of Ham's sin, you may never see this passage the same way again. Now get ready, because what we are about to reveal here may change your perspective on one of the most controversial events in Scripture. And at the end of this video, you will have an answer that few know about this mystery. Let's go on this journey together. The story of Noah and the flood is one of the best known in the Bible. A catastrophic event that wiped out all of humanity, sparing only Noah, his family, and the animals inside the ark. After a time on top of the waters, the ark finally comes to rest on Mount Ararat, and Noah and his family set out to repopulate the earth. So far, everything seems like the beginning of a purified world, without the evil that existed before the flood. But it is precisely in this scenario of renewal that something unexpected happens, an event that would have consequences for future generations, and that makes us reflect to this day. What could have been a new era of hope is soon marked by a shadow, a mistake that would bring a curse with profound repercussions. The story unfolds when Noah, after cultivating a vineyard, makes wine and ends up drunk. He lies inside his tent, unconscious and naked. Then his son Ham enters the tent and sees his father naked, but something that may seem like a simple incident, a moment of carelessness, or even an embarrassing situation, actually carries a much deeper and darker meaning. Ham, instead of showing respect and honoring his father, leaves the tent and tells his brothers Shem and Japheth in a way that suggests mockery and dishonor. The brothers' reaction is completely different. They take a cloak, walk backwards so as not to see their father's nakedness, and cover him, preserving his dignity. And it is exactly here that something happens that surprises many people when reading this passage. When Noah awakens from his sleep and discovers what has happened, he not only rebukes Ham, but goes further. He pronounces a curse. And the most intriguing detail of this curse is that it does not fall directly on Ham, but rather on his son Canaan. Noah declares, "Cursed be Canaan, let him be the lowest of the slaves of his brothers." Genesis 9:25. This raises a number of questions. Why did Noah choose to curse his grandson and not Ham himself? What really happened in that tent? Is there something behind this story that is not explicit in the text? Throughout history, scholars and theologians have discussed this passage in depth, raising hypotheses about the gravity of Ham's sin. Some believe that Ham's error was simply a lack of respect and mockery of his father. Others argue that there is something much more serious implied in the text, something that was not directly recorded, but that can be understood through the context of the time and clues we find in other biblical passages. Furthermore, this curse of Noah was not a mere momentary rebuke. Its impact was felt for generations, especially since Canaan became the ancestor of the Canaanites, a people who would later become one of Israel's greatest enemies. What happened in that tent was not an isolated event, but something that shaped biblical history and had consequences that lasted for centuries. And here a disturbing question arises. If Noah was a righteous man, chosen by God to survive the flood and restart humanity, Why would he place such a severe curse on his own descendants? Could this story be hiding something that we are not seeing? As we delve into this narrative, we will explore every detail and every possible interpretation. Perhaps, by the end of this video, you will see this passage in a completely different way than you did before. If this topic interests you, and you want to understand how this event can connect with spiritual and moral issues to this day, keep watching, because what we are going to reveal next may change your perspective forever. To understand the true gravity of Ham's sin and the reason for Noah's curse, we need to carefully examine the words of the biblical text and the cultural context of the time. At first glance, it seems like a relatively simple incident. Ham saw his father naked and told his brothers. But the intensity of the curse suggests that something much more serious occurred inside that tent. In several passages of Scripture, nudity is associated not only with physical exposure, but with a deeper meaning of shame, vulnerability, and, in some cases, sexual immorality. In Leviticus 18, for example, the expression uncovering nakedness is used as a euphemism for illicit relations. This leads some scholars to hypothesize that Ham not only saw his father naked, but committed a dishonorable act against him. Another theory suggests that Ham may have mocked Noah, exposing his weakness and ridiculing him in front of his brothers. In Hebrew culture, a father's honor was sacred, and any act of disrespect was seen as a serious transgression. By telling Shem and Japheth about Noah's situation, Ham may have been trying to shame his father, something that goes directly against the commandment to honor one's father and mother. But if Ham was the transgressor, why did the curse fall on his son Canaan? This is a question that has challenged interpreters for centuries. Some argue that Canaan may have been an accomplice or even the actual perpetrator of the shameful act against Noah, and that Ham's name was mentioned to represent his lineage. Others believe that Noah's curse on Canaan was prophetic, foretelling the fate of the Canaanites, a people who would later become infamous for their idolatry and moral depravity. Regardless of which interpretation we adopt, what is clear is that this story is not just an isolated account, but a narrative that establishes spiritual and moral standards that echo throughout the Bible. Disrespect for authority figures, the corruption of morality, and the consequences of sin are recurring themes in Scripture, and what happened to Ham and Canaan serves as a solemn warning. Furthermore, there is a powerful symbolic aspect to this episode. Noah, as the only righteous man preserved from the flood, represented a new humanity, a new beginning. His fall into drunkenness and Ham's subsequent sin show that even after the purification of the world, man's sinful nature was still present. The flood eliminated sinners, but it did not eliminate sin. This incident also teaches us about the weight of shame and the consequences of dishonorable acts. While Shem and Japheth cover their father's nakedness without looking, showing respect and integrity, Ham exposes Noah's shame, bringing dishonor not only to his father, but to himself and his descendants. The attitude of Shem and Japheth reflects a fundamental spiritual principle. Love and honor cover shame, while disrespect and sin expose and magnify it. But there is one more intriguing detail. Noah, despite being a righteous man, was wrong to get drunk. This raises another moral dilemma. To what extent does Noah bear responsibility for this episode? Does your mistake justify Ham's attitude? Or does this story teach us that even the righteous can fail, but it is up to others to decide between honor and dishonor? Ultimately, the story of Ham's sin is not just a story of the past, but a mirror for our own conduct. How do we react when we see weakness in others? Are we like Ham, who exposes and ridicules, or like Shem and Japheth, who choose to preserve dignity and act with honor? The answers to these questions can transform the way we view not only this account, but the way we deal with sin, authority, And morality today. Ham's story reaches its climax when Noah awakens from his sleep and realizes that something terrible has happened. Imagine this scene: a man who survived the greatest divine judgment ever recorded, the one chosen by God to restart humanity, now finds himself dishonored inside his own tent. But what makes this situation even darker is that this shame was not caused by an external enemy, but by the son himself. Ham, who should have honored his father, acted in the opposite way. Instead of being respectful, he mocked. Instead of covering up the shame, he exposed it. But what exactly did Ham do? The biblical text leaves us with a gap, and it is precisely in this silence that disturbing theories arise. Some scholars believe that Ham's action was more than just seeing Noah naked. The act could have been accompanied by intentional humiliation or even more serious, shameful behavior. In the ancient East, a father's nudity was something of extreme seriousness. Dishonoring paternal authority was tantamount to defying divine order. And what happens next? Noah wakes up and understands what has been done, but his reaction is not immediate. He doesn't scream, he does not rebuke Ham directly. Instead, he does something that would echo for generations. He casts a curse. But something unexpected happens. Instead of cursing Ham, he curses his son, Canaan. Cursed be Canaan, a slave of slaves he will be to his brothers. Genesis 9:25. Why would Noah do this? Why didn't you curse Ham directly? This is one of the biggest mysteries of this story. One explanation is that Noah, as a patriarch, had a prophetic vision. He was not just reacting to the present, but seeing the future consequences of Ham's act. He saw that Ham's character would be reflected in his descendants. Another, even more shocking theory suggests that Canaan may have been the true author of the dishonor. The biblical text does not give us this answer clearly, but the fact that Canaan was cursed raises this possibility. Regardless of the reason, this curse had real and profound consequences. The descendants of Canaan became the Canaanites, a people marked by idolatry and perverse practices, and who, in the future, would be Israel's greatest enemies. What started as an act inside a tent generated a gigantic domino effect. Ham made a decision that reverberated through generations. While Shem and Japheth chose honor and were blessed, Ham chose mockery and saw his descendants suffer the brunt of the consequences. And here's the big point. How can small choices define entire destinies? How can an act of dishonor span generations? What happened inside that tent didn't stay there. It spread like a curse that shaped the future of humanity. Now, the big question: what really happened in that tent? Was there something darker behind Ham's actions? What if this story had taken another direction? What if, instead of mocking and exposing his own father's nakedness, Ham had chosen the path of honor? Would the curse still have been cast? Would his name have been remembered differently in history? Even more intriguing, why did Shem and Japheth have such a completely opposite attitude? What did they know that Ham didn't? The truth is that this story shows us something powerful about how small choices can have gigantic consequences. Ham made a simple choice. He saw his father vulnerable and decided to laugh. But this seemingly harmless act revealed a much deeper problem within him: a lack of respect, an inability to recognize authority, and perhaps even a hardened heart. But what about us? How many times do we see the weaknesses of others and choose to expose them instead of covering them? How many times do we judge without understanding the consequences? And what's more, does this curse still affect people today? Do Noah's words echo through the generations in some way we don't yet realize? What was really behind Noah's curse on Canaan? The answers to these questions could completely change the way you see this story, and in the next section, we'll reveal some surprising truths about this event. and how it directly connects to something that may be present in your life without you even realizing it. The story of Ham is not just an ancient tale buried in the pages of the Bible. She is a disturbing mirror of human behavior and the inevitable consequences of our choices. Ham's mistake was not just an irreverent attitude, but a reflection of something much deeper, the inability to recognize the value of honor, the weight of words, and the gravity of disrespect. And the most impressive thing, this story does not end with just the curse of Canaan. The destiny of his descendants was marked by this choice, showing that a single attitude can echo through generations. But at the same time, we see that Shem and Japheth, by choosing honor, were blessed and had their generations strengthened. Now think, how many times in life do we come across similar situations? How many times do we mock others' mistakes instead of reaching out? How many times do our words carry consequences that we don't realize? Ham's sin should terrify us because it shows that small decisions can define entire destinies. But at the same time, this story gives us an alternative path. The choice of honor, respect, and blessing, and the big final question, what have you chosen?